pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Good morning, Booktube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back. Today I'm going to do my first book tag, at least the first one I've been personally tagged in, thanks to Curtis Books and Film. This is the Sisterhood of the World tag, and I've got 9 questions to answer, and I'm a third of the way through my first cup of coffee of the day. It's just after 6 a.m. I didn't sleep well. We had a typhoon that hit Tokyo about midnight. I was already wound right up watching booktube video after booktube video, and it took me hours to fall asleep. I think I maybe got 3 hours sleep. So this is as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as I'm gonna get all day, so let's begin. Some of these questions don't fit me at all, but let's just go through them. Number 1. What is a required reading book from elementary school or high school that you thought you'd hate, but ended up really enjoying? I had a wonderful high school English teacher, Mr. Roberts, and this was in small town Saskatchewan, Canada, and he was Welsh with a thick Welsh accent. And aside from being a gifted teacher, Mr. Roberts was famous in the town for being militantly anti-monarchist. So every year he would have to attend the high school graduation banquet. I don't know if they do this now, but back in the 80s and 70s they always opened the banquet with a rendition of God Save the Queen, and everyone would stand and sing, and Mr. Roberts would remain seated and glare at everyone. So it was my first taste of political anything, really. It was very exciting. And more seriously, he instilled in me a love of literature that had a social dimension. So we studied To Kill a Mockingbird, we studied Chaim Potok's The Chosen, but the one I wanted to talk about very briefly, because this is what introduced me to a lifelong interest in South Africa. We read a memoir called Tell Freedom by Peter Abrahams. This was a 1954 memoir about this black South African writer's ordeal of living under apartheid and under the racial prejudice even before apartheid was formally institutionalized, and his decision to go into exile. I don't remember much about the book other than that it just awakened in me a sense of social justice that, has stayed with me all my life. So I remember that book very fondly. Peter Abrahams, I think he originally in about 1950s went into exile in Europe, but he soon settled in Jamaica, and I don't know when he got married, but he and his wife lived in Jamaica for the rest of their lives. He wrote a few more books. His novel, I think, that's fairly well received is Mine Boy. I haven't read it or anything else that he ever wrote, but this kind of breaks my heart. He died in January of this year at the age of 97. Not particularly heartbreaking, a long, full, rich life, but he was murdered. I haven't been able to find out very much online, but I'm just shocked that anybody would come to that end, but especially someone of such advanced age and who's written about man's inhumanity to man so eloquently. Very sad. Number 2. Did your classes do book presentations in school? Did anyone else's presentations make you want to read the book they were talking about? I don't remember anything about that, so that's just far too far in the past, so I'm just going to skip that one. 3. What is your favorite book you've read so far this year? I talked about it on my introductory video. my top 8 reads of the year so far, and one of them, the final book in that video, is my favorite book of the year for sure. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, because I just did. Anthony Marra's A Constellation of Vital Phenomena. I always say phenomenon, but it's phenomena. This is the second best book I've read in my life. It's set in modern-day Chechnya during the wars, with a colorful cast of deeply drawn, fully realized characters that just wormed their way into my heart. I thought, instead of blathering on about it, I'm just going to read the first page. I know Curtis likes when I read my quotes and type them up, so here's the first page. This is a little longer than I usually go, but this will definitely give you a flavor. This is 2004. On the morning after the feds burned down her house and took her father, Hava woke from dreams of sea anemones. While the girl dressed, Ahmed, who hadn't slept at all, paced outside the bedroom door, watching the sky brighten on the other side of the window glass. The rising sun had never before made him feel late. When she emerged from the bedroom, looking older than her 8 years, he took her suitcase and she followed him out the front door. He had led the girl to the middle of the street before he raised his eyes to what had been her house. "Hava, we should go," he said, but neither moved. The snow softened around their boots as they stared across the street to the wide patch of flattened ash. A few orange embers hissed in pools of grey snow, but all else was char. Not 7 years earlier, Ahmed had helped Doka build an addition so the girl would have a room of her own. He had drawn the blueprints and chopped the hardwood and cut it into boards and turned them into a room. And when Doka had promised to help him build an addition to his own house, should he ever have a child, Ahmed had thanked his friend and walked home, the knot in his throat unraveling into a sob when the door closed behind him. Carrying the lumber the 40 meters from the forest had left his knuckles blistered, his underarms sopping, but now a few hours of flames had lifted what had taken him months to design, weeks to carry, days to build, all but the nails and rivets, all but the hinges and bolts, all into the sky. And too were carried the small treasures that had made Doka's house his own. There was the hand-carved chess set on a round side table. When moved, the squat white king wobbled from side to side, like a man just sober enough to stand, and Doka had named his majesty Boris Yeltsin. There was the porcelain vase adorned with Persian arabesques, and beside that a cassette deck radio with an antenna long enough to scrape the ceiling when propped up on a telephone book, yet too short to reach anything but static. There was the 85-year-old Quran, the purple cover writhing with calligraphy, that Doka's grandfather had purchased in Mecca. There were these things, and the flames ate these things, and since fire doesn't distinguish between the word of God and the word of the Soviet Communications Registry Bureau, both Quran and telephone directory returned to his mouth in the same inhalation of smoke. So that is how this novel opens. I hope you will check it out. Whew, I just got shivers from reading that out loud. First thing in the morning, I'm awake now. I think I have to keep reading. 4. Do you prefer series or standalones? Yeah, standalones. I'm impatiently waiting for the final of the Wolf Hall trilogy, Hilary Mantel. I can't think of any other series of books that I've ever read in my adult life. There must have been at least 1 or 2 others. Being exclusively interested in literary fiction, series don't come up very much in my reading life, so. 5. Do you prefer character or plot-based stories? Interesting binary there. I guess if I had to choose one, I would echo what Curtis said. Character-based. I mean, a novel with an interesting plot with poorly drawn characters is certainly going to end up quickly becoming a DNF for me, so I guess I would say character-driven novels are my thing, but I like a good plot too. And if it's just somebody on Booktube said this recently, if it's just 100 pages of somebody sitting in their living room thinking about going to the corner store to buy some tea, that doesn't work for me either. So it has to be some plot. Number 6. Where is your favorite place to read? Anywhere, really. I do a lot of reading here at home because it's very comfortable. So this is my recliner sofa, and I spend hours and hours here. But I also love reading in cafes, and there's a cafe a 5-minute walk from here that I often spend a lot of time at every week. I spent 2 hours there yesterday. Ebooks anywhere, on the train, in restaurants, on the audiobooks. Usually I prefer to listen to them while I'm walking or on the train, but sometimes, especially if I'm doing an audio reading combo, which if you've watched some of my videos, you know that I often like to listen to the audio while reading the text simultaneously, and so that could be anywhere that I like to read. The next couple are interesting. Number 7, the last 5 Booktube videos that you've watched. These are the ones, I guess they're in maybe reverse order, that kept me up so late last night. I discovered a new to me Booktube channel, Ernestly Eston, and I only watched a couple videos, but I enjoyed watching a tag that I wasn't familiar with, and I think I'm going to do it maybe later this week. And so I watched his A to Z bookish survey tag, and some of those questions were pretty interesting, and I enjoyed getting a sense of his reading tastes and his channel. I listened to Matthew Sharapa, his latest video as of last night, about bailing on Auster's 4321 and picking up Mosley's Elmet, and he's convinced me that I don't need to bother with 4321 and that I do want to check out Elmet, so that was great. And I enjoyed Britta Bowler's Man Bookering commentary on the short list. I think I watched it for the second time late last night. She and I agree on many things and not on all. It's very stimulating to watch her. This is probably a famous Booktube channel, but I'm just discovering it. She reads a lot of, I think, exclusively international fiction, and so her book haul, the book channel is called Portal in the Pages, and it was her Around the World book haul, which I think just went up yesterday. I was drooling by the end, all those fabulous sounding books. And from Curtis's Books and Films, his Sisterhood of the World tag, where he very kindly gave me a shout out and tagged me. He's the first booktuber that I'm kind of getting to know through both of us. We're each watching and commenting on each other's videos in the last week. It's been really great, and he's been very welcoming, so thank you, Curtis. So those are my 5 Booktube videos. The next question, the last 5 non-Booktube videos you've watched. So this was really a challenge for me because I've watched nothing but Booktube videos on YouTube for at least 3 weeks. Started my own channel about 8 days ago or something, and all I've watched, there's very few exceptions, so I had to go back into my other YouTube identity to find the final 3. Plus, I'd been watching some tutorial videos on how to do certain things with editing or whatever, and that's kind of boring. But this is the list. I'm a ESL teacher, or I guess outside of the West we call them EFL, English as a Foreign Language teacher, in Tokyo. I sometimes use videos in my classes, And one thing that I like to do, most of my classes are just free conversation. The students talk about their weekends in pairs, and then they tell me their weekend stories, and I make notes of all the errors I hear, and then I write all the sentences with mistakes on the board, and they discuss those sentences and what the correct sentence might be in partners, and then I go through them and give them the corrections. It's not the way I was taught to teach EFL, but it's what Japanese students crave, so I give them what they want. If any of them mention anything to do with music, I quickly pull up the song or the singer on either Apple Music, which I subscribe to, or if I can't find it there, on YouTube. And I like to surprise them by playing it for them while I'm writing those sentences on the board, because it takes me 5 or 10 minutes to get them written up, and they can listen to the music. So that's a very long way of introducing the first video, which is Canadian country pop singer K.D. Lang's rendition of Canadian poet and folk singer the late Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, which she sang at the opening ceremonies to the I was going to say the gay games, that's a Freudian slip, the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympics a few years ago in Vancouver. But her performance of Hallelujah is just gorgeous. And one of my students had been talking about finding it, stumbling upon it, so I played it for them. That's a long story. The next one's also for another class, and I'll make this one shorter. This class is, I get paid the equivalent of $60 for a 1-hour newspaper article reading class that I teach at a company. None of the students, except for one, the organizer, none of the students show up until 30 minutes later. So the first 30 minutes I'm sitting talking to the organizer guy, just about nothing, or about not nothing, but just having free conversation. And then the other students trickle in around 30 minutes later, and then I do a 30-minute lesson on whatever newspaper article I have picked. It's the highest paid class I have, and I wish to hell it was every day. It's just twice a month, and I love the students and everything, but it's just like I'm getting paid big bucks mostly just to talk to one guy. Anyway, the article that we did last week in that class was about one of the feel-good stories from Hurricane Harvey in Houston. Did you see about the furniture owner that had opened his huge showroom to the displaced people in Houston to sleep there indefinitely, and very heartwarming. So the article was about that, and I finished off the lesson by showing them a YouTube video on the same topic. Next one, I don't even remember if I watched the thing to the end, but it is an important story about Canadian charity organizations helping gay people in Chechnya escape to the West, escape to Canada, perhaps. A very important story that I think I just watched this quick news report and haven't made time to delve into the story further, even though it's one near and dear to my heart. Number 4 is an interview that I watched on YouTube with the Ugandan novelist Jennifer Makumbi. I just started this novel and mentioned it in my Friday reads. Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, and there's quite a few interviews with her on YouTube, and she has a lovely energy and fierce intelligence. So that's number 4. The last one I think I showed to my 8-year-old nephew Michael when I was back in Canada for a visit last month, and it's about the Tokyo train staff pushing people into the train so the doors can close during rush hour, because I think he couldn't quite believe that happened. So that's number 5. Last question. If you could live in any world with any character, what and whom would they be? This question isn't really my kind of question, but I'm going to do my best, because I do have an answer that, I do have a character or a couple characters from one book, which you can see right here, that spring to mind. But this is kind of like, if you could be any animal, what would you be? And those kind of questions make my skin crawl. This one doesn't, though, so let's give it a shot. I would choose to spend my time in the world conjured up by this novel, The 1 in a Million Boy by Monica Wood. This was one of my top reads last year. And I didn't... Do you know that book? My grandmother asked me to call and apologize. There's a couple different English translations out, or at least there's a couple different translations of the title. If I've screwed that up, I'll put the correction at the bottom, but I couldn't get into that book. That made my flesh crawl. It was really not my cup of tea. But I think if you like that, you would like this. And this one's hit me just right. It's about... How old is the boy? I forget. He's maybe 10-year-old boy. He seems Asperger's-y. He's a Boy Scout. He lives with his mom and has an absent father. Like, they're divorced, and the father, Quinn, has never really been in his life very much. Never been really comfortable with his eccentric young son. The kid is never named, but he, as a Boy Scout, he's doing volunteer work, I think once a week, at the home of a 104-year-old lady, Una Vitkus. He's doing some tree trimming and yard work, and they start to become friends, and he's also doing an oral history recording with her. And then he dies very suddenly. This is not a spoiler. It's in the first chapter, I think, second chapter. It's on the back cover for sure. He dies, and his grieving father, Quinn, who had never been able to connect with his son, decides to fulfill the remainder of the volunteer commitment that his son had been doing with 104-year-old Una Vitkus, and the relationship between them is so poignant in an unsentimental way, and it just... I guess there's some of the kind of feelings of the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime, and it's really hard to write an old lady into a novel and not make it stereotypical, and it just works beautifully, or at least it did for me. So there's my rice cooker. Breakfast is gonna be ready soon. This book just pulled on my heartstrings. A writer has to work really hard to pull on my heartstrings, because I have such a deep aversion to sentimentality and schlock, and this one just worked for me. So if I was going to live in any world with any character, I would want to be sitting at the table with 104-year-old Una Vitkus and the boy's father, Quinn, who was a bad father, but is a deeply loving and lovable man. And I guess I would want to talk with them, but being the shy, retiring guy that I am, I'd probably just want to eavesdrop as she did card tricks, and the banter and the deep throb of love between them that never got expressed in any overt way. So yeah, so that is the Sisterhood of the World tag, and I'm new to Booktube and really shy, so I'm not sure if I have the confidence to tag anybody, but I guess I would tag Liv from the Book Nook if she hasn't done this video. And of course I would also tag Kendra Winchester. She's a friend of mine on the app Litzy that I seem to manage to find a way to mention on each and every video I make. So I also challenge Kendra. But if anybody, feel free. That's all for now. Thanks for stopping by.